Hello and welcome to this week's video. This week we're going to be shaking up the formula because we all know why we're here, so we might as well get straight into it and start off as we often do with these reviews by getting straight into the positives. Just a quick little heads up before we get into the review, just going to quickly say, recording this rather late at night, I'm a little bit tired, a little bit delirious, so if we go into some strange directions, we'll just have to cross that bridge when we come to it together. But anyway, right into the review, right into the positives, so... It turns out I was wrong, and this week we did see the return of the gig, despite me thinking that from what we saw last week and from where we are in the narrative, I just thought this was just going to be setting up for something that was going to happen off-screen and in the background, something that would get vaguely mentioned here and there, or maybe get a little bit touched upon at some later point, like Pop Step gets picked up, or some villain plots something to happen there. You get the basic idea, but... yeah, that wasn't the case, so we're now back straight into it. Though, to be fair though, this week it's a little bit more of a framing device and mechanism to deliver exposition, as well as an excuse for a few fun jokes here and there, more so than it is the focus of the episode as a whole, and to be quite honest with you, I'm perfectly fine with that because, yeah, last season... I think that as much as I enjoyed the whole gig stuff, it really just didn't go anywhere, or at least nowhere interesting to me. I mean, you know what, I'm not going to go over it because it would just be repeating myself, and you can just watch my previous reviews to get a heads up as to how I think about all that stuff. But with that said, I have to say that the episode as a whole entity, it has a tone and structure to it which feels closer to something that we get from the main series. Its humour and how it balances its exposition and how it's able to also deliver the action sequence in such an effective way feels like something we would expect to see from My Hero Academia itself. That's not to say that that is rare in the spin-off, it's just... this felt a lot more like a My Hero Academia episode to me, almost from start to finish. I will say, and this is, I admit, something that's going to kind of go over the heads of quite a few people, but I think that the pacing of this episode was honestly bloody fantastic and some of the best we've seen in the run of Vigilantes. There's just so much that ends up happening in this episode, and yet at no point does anything feel like it's dragging, and at no point does it ever feel like we're rushing through everything. We learn so much, we see so much, and yet it is able to balance all these things bloody brilliantly. Our focus might shift from page to page, but at no point does it ever feel like that attention is being diverted or stolen. There is, let's be honest, quite a lot going on here. We have the stuff with the gig, we have the action sequence with Captain Celebrity and Ingenium, we have the fun little stuff with Crawler, we have the stuff with the pro heroes. There's a lot going on, and yet, remarkably, it's all balanced bloody well, and I have to really take my hat off to it. The stuff with the gig as a whole entity, I think, is fine. It's a nice little framing device, though I will admit that I'm using that term somewhat incorrectly. It's a neat little setting, it's a good excuse to get a bunch of characters together at once, though it does feel like the gig itself has metamorphosized into what it was supposed to be in the first place, that when the manager of the shop was planning all this stuff, they just wanted a light little bit of music while people were shopping or getting their lunch, and then Makoto turned it into freaking Glastonbury. But now we're here, and it's cute. It's cute. There's a slight, I will admit, part of me that feels it's a little bit embarrassing because, you know, Pop Step's trying to build herself up as a pop star, and yet there she is as just being light dinner entertainment, or light lunch entertainment as it should be. But the whole sequence of events is fun. It's good for what it is. The little sequence that we get behind stage where one of the other performers is trying to big up the little youngsters that have come from the local school to do a little bit of a performance by telling them, oh, a pro hero's going to be showing up here today, so you better be on your best behaviour. Only for no pro hero to show up, and they just have to resort to using Crawler, which once again means that it's time for us to take the piss out of our main character, which again results in him being outed as a vigilante again. And it's waved off as a joke because everyone thinks his vigilante name is Crawler, not Crawler, so it just goes over everyone's heads. It's a neat little gag, a fun little bit. It really is just good for what it is. I can't really complain about that. Of course, we as readers know that there are actually proper pro heroes there, but given where we are in their particular timeline, it's not like they're really household names at this point. Maybe Midnight is, because we see her very much in her civilian gear, But we see Eraserhead in his hero get-up, and he just looks like the half-asleep tramp he usually does, a look that I've been rocking since I was about 12 years old. We do, to be fair though, we do end up getting an actual pro hero showing up towards the end of it. Captain Celebrity once again makes a big entrance, destroying the stage in the process. I just imagine it like being a little bit of a Superman entry thing, because that's kind of how it goes. He lowers himself in and goes, "Ha ha! Mind if I drop in?" Oh no! Alright, to be fair though, it wasn't him that destroyed the arena. It wasn't him that destroyed the stage. It was the villain that did it, but... and somehow the villain did that by just flying really fast and snatching Crawler. Like, the humour in this episode was fine. It was very enjoyable. Not the most fun we've had in this series, but there's some really fun jokes here and there. Again, nothing to really knock my socks off, but it does feel a lot more keeping with the tone and feeling of the series as a whole entity, including the main series, more so than the opening episode that we got a few episodes back. Not going to go over it because I don't want to repeat myself, and I don't want to give the impression that I have an issue with that kind of humour, but it's just that it felt a little bit jarring to me. Though maybe jarring's the wrong word. A bit gratuitous, I suppose it is, but like I said, I'm not going to get into that too much, because I don't want to be repetitive, but I feel that this series, both Vigilantes and the main series itself, the humour works best when it's character and situation driven, as I honestly think that plays to the strengths of the writers in both the series, and it is something that feels a lot more universal. It's the kind of gags that you could do with almost any other superhero character in almost any other superhero series. Just change a few things about, and it's just as strong as a joke there. The action sequence that we did end up getting with Captain Celebrity and Ingenium and that Bat villain that kind of looks like a cross between Man-Bat from Batman and Judge Death from Judge Dredd, which is a sentence that I'm really happy that I was able to get that just done in one go, no rehearsals, but hey-ho, enough patting on the back from me. I thought the action sequence itself was good. I don't think it's quite as good as the last time that they fought this Bat villain guy. Decent, fun, but to be fair though, the last time that they fought him, it was part of I think that was the big, like, volume ending thing from about 3 or 4 volumes ago. Whereas this one, it just feels like more of a common or garden variety action sequence, which is good for what it is. It's put together quite well. The panel work is decent, and it gives us a great sense of momentum. I don't really think it's going above and beyond as far as the art style and what we see going on, because it is a lot of people flying or racing very fast, while there's a lot of motion lines in the background, which... okay, neat, good, great, but there's nothing else that's really here to end up going with it. I think that, honestly, that whole sequence just exists to tease the next major villain, because, as we know, B is not here anymore, so you have to set up for the next villain, and that next villain is Scarface Delivery Man, who might well show up in a little bit more greater detail as we go forward. Or alternatively, it's just there to maybe juxtapose with the promotional reel with Captain Celebrity and Ingenium, that little thing that they were doing. Like, I will admit that with the little promo reel thing that they did, I did like the subversion of that, because it did look like we were setting up for an action sequence and we were just cutting towards that. You know, you have Crawler singing in the background in a way which you'd expected to be if this was an animated action sequence. You have a character singing in the background whilst all the cool stuff is happening. You've seen it 110 times before a different series, so I don't need to explain that to you, but you get the idea. Though, to be honest, if I was, like, putting this together for the animation, I honestly think the more interesting way to do it would be you have this really great, fantastically animated action sequence with Crawler's rather average singing in the background. Granted, that's a bit of an obscure joke, a little bit of a thing that feels a little bit too much of a me thing, but I think it would work. Because they mentioned, you know, Crawler gets forced to win. No, wait, he doesn't get forced. He chooses to just spontaneously do karaoke at this event, and they make a comment backstage he's kind of okay. So yeah, he's a bit of an average singer, so you just have some kind of average, kind of flat sounding singing whilst this really cool, brilliantly animated action sequences going on. The kind of action sequence where they just thrown all the budget and you just get some kind of rather flat singing in the background. Again, it's kind of a bit of a me joke, but still, I kind of like it. we do, if we kind of shift gears to something a little bit more serious, we do get a little bit more of a, well, not even a little bit more of, we explicitly get a confirmation as to what happened to that lad that became the big eel monster. And it turns out I was right. They were kidnapped and groomed and is pumped with a bunch of drugs and such to turn them into the creature that we see today. The finer details of it, I was kind of a little bit, well, I wasn't wrong about, I just didn't get right. I didn't quite nail those down, but, you know, it kind of just confirms that, and it doesn't really matter if I nail down those finer details, because it's still creepy, and it's an aspect of the story which I will admit, just thinking about it now spontaneously, and it is a little bit off script, so forgive me, there's a part of me that's a little bit bummed out that this isn't more of a grand revelation. Like, it's kind of something that we could kind of guess what happening and had been the case given what happened to him, but I don't know. I just think it feels a little bit odd to be appearing in an episode like this. In this episode, as I mentioned before, we get the return of the aforementioned pro-heroes. We see Eraserhead and Midnight back again. And whilst it is neat to see them, I will admit that it does feel like we're seeing a little bit too much of them at this point. This whole series, Vigilantes, is supposed to be a spin-off about Crawler and his friends, but increasingly we're bringing in characters from the main series. And it was fine when it just felt like a little bit of a brief cameo, or just a little bit of a thing of, oh well, these two characters were active at the same time, so let's have them meet and cross over. But now it's starting to turn into a little bit more of an extended stay, which means we're getting less time with our main cast. It's just the sheer economics of screen time, or book time, as you suppose it should be in this case, and their presence here and now is fine, because I think it's a decent way to deliver exposition about the whole stuff with the instant villains and Trigger and the like. But it feels like it's kind of taking stuff away from our main cast and taking stuff away from them. Though with that said, Crawler as a character never really seemed like he showed much of an interest to investigate into this stuff in the first place. That always felt like something that the more Knuckleduster was involved in, so yeah, it makes sense that he wouldn't be the one delivering the exposition or having it delivered to him, because that's not something he's really up to right now, but it does kind of feel like something that maybe our heroes should be discovering, not side characters. But again, it makes sense that they would be discussing it because they're pro-heroes and they're going to be a lot more connected to this case and know the finer details of it, unlike our vigilantes who are just kind of finding their way through this as best as they can do. As I mentioned previously, we do get another look at our potential longer-term villain. How long they will be the long-term villain for, I really don't know, because at this point, we haven't even got a good look at them. All we know is that they disguise themselves as a delivery man, and they have a scar on their face, and they seem to have a slightly glowy eye, but that's just about it. I will admit that whilst it is neat that we're getting a slow build-up to them, and we're building up some kind of mystique here, and this sense of, well, they could be anybody. They could be a character whom we've already had introduced to us in the past, but now we're going to learn out, oh my god, that guy's actually a villain after all, but at the same time, it feels like it's dragging things out a little bit too much. That does feel like I worry is going to be the negative feeling that I have overall for this particular volume, that they're dragging their feet a lot. They're not showing us the stuff that I think really should be being shown right now, but hey-ho, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But also we are in a slightly negative tone. Let's move on and talk about the negatives. And I will admit there aren't that many, because as a whole entity, I did really bloody enjoy this episode. There's so much to enjoy about it. I will discuss that a little bit more when we get into the overview. But as far as the negatives are concerned, this isn't necessarily an issue with this episode itself, but it's more of a broader feeling that I'm getting with the series as a whole entity, which is the feeling that Crawler is starting to feel increasingly like a side character in his own story. Now, this is a criticism that you can easily level to the main series and to certain other modern anime and manga series that I've been reading or watching recently, so maybe this is more of an industrial problem, but for the here and now, I feel that whilst having jokes at the character's expense is fine, like we get here with him being mistaken for someone else and being a bit of a crappy singer. We are reaching the point, I feel, that the focus is becoming increasingly less about him and his life as a vigilante and how he squares that with his life as a student and the part-time job he has. Bearing in mind we've not had any further discussion of those whatsoever, it feels as though he's just kind of fading off into the background. He feels incredibly passive for a protagonist and doesn't feel like he's really quite a proactive part of the story anywhere near as much as he should do, with everything just happening around him. The investigation into Trigger and the instant villains isn't something that he's actively involved in or actively investigating, and he never really was. As I mentioned previously, that whole world, that whole element was always something that Knuckle Duster was more interested in because of obvious reasons, and now we got the pro heroes getting more involved in investigating it, and he's rolling all of this just seems to bungle his way into fighting an instant villain, getting in way over his head, then a hero comes along to save the day. Like, he doesn't really feel as though he's doing much at the moment, and whilst I can forgive that to a certain degree because we've just come off a rather heavy storyline, so now it feels as though we're in the palate cleanser area, it feels as though at the same time this is just indicative of a wider problem here. Like, for a character that always wanted to be a hero but missed out on his chance to be a hero because he decided to, well, be a hero, it feels odd to me that he isn't more proactive, that he isn't going out of his way to understand what's really going on, that he's not investigating things quite to the extent that he really should do. All he's doing is showing up, knocking the bad guy in the head, then leaving, much like the pro heroes are doing. So all this talk that he had like last week about, oh, we us vigilantes need to be here when the heroes can't be there to look after the people, he's just doing the same stuff the heroes are doing. And honestly, it feels as though we do need to spend more time with him. I think that the fact that Knuckle Duster isn't around itself needs to be addressed more, and we need to see Crawler starting to come into his own as being a hero a little bit more, because whilst I do appreciate the fact that we are seeing him in a little bit more of a laid-back state, we're seeing him screwing around a lot more, we're seeing him act a little bit more like I suppose a typical early 20-something young man would do if they had superpowers and were just kind of arsing about pretending to be a superhero on the weekends. At the same time, there's a lot of bigger stuff happening in the story, and he doesn't seem to be part of any of it. Maybe this will change going forward, but we'll soon see. With all that said, let's get into the overview, and I have to say that this is a very well-made episode. The artwork is charming, fun, and cute. There's some genuinely fun and funny moments within it. I did like the gags and the action sequences that we see with this. I think that as a whole entity, it's just a bloody solid episode, and that's pretty much what we need with this. If we're not going to have an episode that is pushing the story forward leaps and bounds, then we still need to have it push it forward a little bit and just give us something entertaining around all of that, which it does perfectly well. I do feel as though, and as I mentioned in the comment section in my previous video, that it does feel that certain areas are being dragged along ever so slightly. I do feel as a whole entity, it's still fun for what it is. With all that said and done, let us get into Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner. Partway Comment Corner, partway Rant, but we'll soon get onto that in just a moment. I'll try and keep it short because I know this video's gone on for quite a while. So, our comment for this week comes from BigX1, who says, "This episode was fun. I wanted something a bit more from it, but it was fine." This was referring to last week's episode, equipment issues, and I do agree. The episode itself was fun. I think it was lacking in something to make it a little bit more substantial, but as a whole entity, it was perfectly fine for what it was. I do think there was a little bit more quality there, and I think, on hindsight, I really gave it credit for, but it's decent enough. So, just to quickly touch up on my rant, so, for whatever reason, YouTube seems really keen on killing this channel. I know this sounds hyperbolic, but that's certainly how it feels right now. The previous episode had its views wiped from it. After maybe 2 or 3 days, it managed to settle about 8 views, which I will admit is really not the kind of viewing figures I want to be getting. The viewing figures in general for this entire channel have been slowly tanking off to the point where I don't think I'm going to be doing any more Vigilantes reviews after this volume is finished, but we'll see where we go with that. It gets to about 8 views, and maybe about Tuesday, maybe sometime after I've recorded the previous this review, the viewing figures go down to 0, and that only happens when YouTube thinks that there's been some dodgy dealings going on. They think that some bots have been involved. I don't know if there was. I don't know if someone has been using a bot to inflate the viewing figures. Either way, they reset it down to 0, and last time I checked, it's up to 12, so I don't know if all the views were restored and it's gained 4, or it's gained 12 and it should be around 20, but when I look at my analytics page, it says the video has received 0, so I really don't know anymore, and it is kind of depressing. So yeah, we got to hold on for the next 8 weeks or so until the next season comes back, and hope that that helps to regenerate the channel. Otherwise, I don't think I'm going to be doing this up until next year, but we'll see soon how that goes. So with that in mind, be sure to like, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube wants you to, because at this point, I really don't know how long you'll keep doing this for. Thank you all for listening, and see you next time. Goodbye!
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!